Our panel today will be focusing on entrepreneurship. Joining our panel is Meryl Johnson, founder and CEO of Bean Ninja, and Aaron Birkby, co-founder and head of performance of Peak Persona. Joining them is Bond academic associate professor Baden. Now I'd like to welcome our panel. We have Meryl. Thank you, Meryl, for being here, and Aaron, welcome. And we also have Baden, our academic. Our first question, I guess, to you, Meryl, is that it's been some challenging times lately. How have you managed to cope through these times?
Yeah, it certainly has been challenging. I think with Bean Ninjas, the business that I run, being set up as a remote team, we were lucky when the lockdown happened that we already had the infrastructure and our team were used to working from home, but it definitely presented some challenges with childcare and team members having children and trying to balance that. And then with the government stimulus packages in multiple countries that we're dealing with, trying to interpret that. So for us, it was a period of more work, but probably less chargeable work than normal as we're trying to support all of the small businesses to get through a tricky time.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, similar experience to Meryl, actually, like busier than ever. But revenue definitely down. But I think for me, it was a realignment of values. Just balancing family time again, having the kids home from school and working from home. I found an amazing experience that I actually don't want to give up post this period. I'd like to make that my new normal.
If I can jump on that concept for a moment, there's obviously Meryl, Bean Ninja's virtual business model, and I think perhaps put you in a position to be able to take advantage of that infrastructure that already existed. But I think that the modern organisation coming post COVID-19 or whatever new normal we're having, this normality around remote work and being able to manage work in new and different ways is something that the average business is going to have to be across. Can you talk maybe about Bean Ninja to start off with? What does it do, and why did you go down the virtual route to begin with?
Yeah, so we're described as a bookkeeping business, and we help high growth e-commerce businesses and agencies to understand their numbers, and we do that through bookkeeping, financial reporting, and some financial literacy courses and programs that we run. So that's the business. But the reason that we started virtually, it was actually we were forced into it. And I'm glad that we were. But my business partner lived in Sydney. I lived on the Gold Coast. And so already we were living in different places. And so we decided from the beginning that we needed to set ourselves up on the cloud. We're doing that through Xero, the accounting software that we use and that we were helping our clients use. But all of the other tools that we needed to use to collaborate also were in the cloud. And then as we started to hire people, we realised that, well, hang on, we can run a business and live in different cities. So maybe it doesn't matter where our staff are based. We want to find people who align with our values and who want to come and work for a virtual bookkeeping business. And it doesn't really matter where they're based. It's more about that values alignment and having great people. And so we started to hire people around the world, and we've got people that are based in 6 different countries around the world now, and some not quite digital nomads, but they definitely move around from place to place every 6 months or year.
So you just turned 5. Bean Ninja's had its 5th birthday this month. And last year you were awarded with Xero's Australian Bookkeeping Partner of the Year. And when I look at Bean Ninjas, I don't instantly think bookkeeping. In essence, you've actually created a new industry, a traditional industry that was perceived to be a particular way, and you've looked outside of the box and you've said, well, what could it be? And in fact, I've heard you say in the past that I don't actually think that the industry of bookkeeping will exist in the future, right? Yeah. Tell us about that approach to business that you have, this creating something new rather than being aligned with what already is.
So the reason that Bean Ninjas started was that I saw a business model that was working in another industry, and you talked about productized services, and so I saw an example of this in the IT industry, and it was a business called WP Curve. And so that was the genesis for me thinking about, well, could this be applied to the accounting industry? And I think that you can take something from another industry or another sphere and then bring it to your own industry and create something new. So that was, I guess, part of the genesis story with Bean Ninjas, about thinking, I don't want to run a traditional accounting firm where I need to be in an office. I work with local clients. I want to build a global startup, and where's my skill set? And that happened to be in the accounting industry. So I was trying to apply what I was learning in the startup world, and also my particular skill set in accounting to build something that was different. And I still try and approach business like that. So what can I learn and try and read and listen to podcasts and learn about different things that I can bring back to the accounting industry and think we don't have to do things the way they were done 10 years ago or the way they were done a year ago. And you're right, I think even though Bean Ninja started as a bookkeeping business, we don't think of ourselves as that now, even though it's very easy to say, oh, well, bookkeeping, because people know what that is. But I think maybe in 5 years' time, there might not be many bookkeepers and the industry will have evolved.
Yeah, so I'm interested to know, you mentioned you've gone global. You have operations and in fact you have paying customers from around the world. And traditionally a bookkeeper might have seen themselves as being quite a regional business, reliant on personal relationships. Yeah. Tell us about how you approached going global. Surely there's so much uncertainty that sits in that environment. How do you go about launching a new business model?
Well, it's interesting. It feels like it's quite a big thing to be an Australian business and then to launch overseas. And it feels like there's so many things you've got to think about. Do you need to actually set up an office somewhere? Do you need to hire staff over there? And we tried to approach it a little bit differently. So we knew that we wanted to be a global business, which is why we tried to get a business name with a .com when we started. And so we just were referred, I think, 4 or 5 customers over a period of months of US-based businesses. And we thought, well, that's enough. If we can get insurance, we can look at what are the risks about going into the US. How do we mitigate those risks? If we know there's demand, we've been referred 5 customers. Let's just use that money, hire a CPA in the US, and let's just try it. So we didn't spend any money apart from the insurance to get started and hiring that team member. And then we just iterated and learnt. And actually the US is our biggest market now. 70% of our business, which is run in Australia, 70% of our customers are based in the US.
So if I can summarise that was the essence of the market talking to you, that there being initial traction that you hadn't actually gone out to say, oh, we want to be in the US. The US was calling and saying, we want this type of service. And your first foray wasn't, let's set up an office and hire a staff of 10 and go. It was, let's just see what the risk needs to be. Let's put a person in. Let's see what traction occurs and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just lots of iterations from there. So we had no idea how much do you charge in the US. We don't know. Let's just try something. Will customers buy it? No. Okay, well, let's try again and then try again until you figure out and learn from what your customers want.
If I can, Aaron, this is a classic risk-taking approach, right? We're undertaking risk. You're a 14-time company founder, what we refer to in the industry as a serial entrepreneur. Currently, you're co-founder of an entity called Peak Persona. What is Peak Persona, and how have you kind of arrived at this juncture in your life?
Sure. So Peak Persona delivers online programs to help humans grow and basically realise their potential. And predominantly we work with entrepreneurs. And this came about because both my co-founder Peter Ellis and I were mentoring and coaching a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and we realised most of our time's actually spent helping them come past themselves, essentially. It was less about actually advising them on business strategy and more about actually just helping them unlock limiting beliefs or patterns of behaviour. So in true startup style, we actually built it entirely from customer demand. So we were delivering a session on how to be a facilitator, and we shared some of the tips and techniques we use to prepare ourselves mentally. And that was actually the most asked about piece of content. So we spun up a registration page for a program without actually having a program and just with a credit card link and see if anyone purchased. And overnight we had 60 people sign up. And then there was that panic of, wow, we better actually build something and deliver it. But now, fast forward 18 months later, we have over 300 alumni from 9 countries. And now really, we feel like we've found the model. We found our little niche and now starting to scale it up.
And out of that, you've actually had corporates engage, looking for particular solutions. You've had Google coming forward and saying, we want something for our high-performing YouTube creators. There've been these follow-on add-ons from an initial kernel of an idea. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's funny how those serendipitous moments happen. But Google came and it turns out that YouTube influencers have many of the same issues that entrepreneurs face. And so they contracted us to develop a series of workshops that's now used around the world, but also other corporates. So pharmaceutical giants, for example, who have Salesforce, they have chemical engineers, they have this range of different people, but how do they actually unlock innovation? Like, how do they change the mindset and culture within inside an organization? And it turns out there's techniques that have been used in Silicon Valley, places like Israel, London, Berlin, that we can actually adapt and adopt internally to do that cultural transformation piece.
So you mentioned earlier that you put something up and all of a sudden 60 people purchased and you're like, oh, I better build that now. This has been a bit of a history of yours. The first time I came across you, you were running a company called Orinda. Orinda was an early mover in the productized internet for public spaces for hotels. Like, you could start charging clients. For any of you that used to travel and be on the road sales in the 1990s and 2000s, you used to pay $30 a day to get internet access, remember? Orinda was one of the first movers in that space. Can you talk about the mindset that is needed to build an industry for something that doesn't really exist, or that perhaps exists in a very unsatisfactory way, to go out and create something new? What is it that sits inside your head that allows you to be comfortable in doing that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think you've touched on this before in the discussion. It's the difference between seeing what is versus what should be. And like you said, for me, I've been very lucky in having customers come to me and say what they want. And then you can just extrapolate from that to what things should look like. So in the case of Orinda, that actually spawned, again, randomly. My brothers were setting up a restaurant and they wanted some point of sale software that would enable them to give internet access to backpackers based on their time and how much they spent in the cafe. And there was no software to do that at the time. So I wrote some software, and we were lucky, being based on the Gold Coast, that most of the hotel owners and managers would come in on their Monday, sit in the cafe, and they got to use this software. And they're like, well, what's this? I need this in my hotel. And that spawned a business that we took to about 6 million users around the world. But it all came from that customer-driven, there's a problem here, there's an opportunity here. And I think that's the lens. Whenever I see a problem, I never see it as a problem. I see it as an opportunity. And I don't claim to have any vision. It's just purely about listening to the customer and the market and what they want.
I wanted to sort of bring this to, perhaps because we're at a university, and an academic point of view that might explain maybe this difference that is happening in the approach to business. So we all know that we're in a risky world, right? And it's becoming more risky, but we know that risk can actually be defined differently. We can think of a VUCA world, and there's volatility and uncertainty. And volatility is what we're used to in business. That's where we can quantifiably measure the potential risk. What's the deviation away from expected? Can I measure what that chance is? Yes, I can to some degree. And therefore I can put a plan in and predict what the outcome can be. This is the world of Lean Six Sigma and total quality management and lots of tools that are in established businesses. And that's all well and good when you can predict outcomes. But the world is far more uncertain today. We've got so many more potential outcomes that you can't quantifiably measure. And that's the world of uncertainty. And like, if we didn't need it, COVID-19 has just proved to us that the world is far more uncertain today. And that's the world of creation. That's the world of opportunity in the way things could be, and what are my customers telling me rather than what am I good at internally. And I think we've seen that come out in both of your stories as to, I see a vision for the way that the business could be, and going out and taking advantage of that. Does that resonate with your experience in business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was something you touched on there around risk. And I think, many people see an entrepreneur as a risk taker. But as an entrepreneur, I see it the other way around. I think the employee mindset is actually the riskiest because they have no control. So you could be made redundant. You could be put into a position or a role that you don't want to do. But as the entrepreneur, I have complete control of self. I may not be able to control anything in the situational circumstance, to your point, but I have control of self. And I think the second thing you touched on there, this period of time through COVID is just it's like a case study of what's coming or what's already happening. I think you look at Moore's law and the exponential rate of change of technology, and that's just an enabler. What's actually happening is business model innovation. And we're seeing supply chains completely disrupted. Everything's going human to human and peer to peer, and traditional brokers or agents, all those models have been broken down. And I think this has been a great fast track for us as a society to actually get a new normal, because this will be perpetual. This rate of change will now be perpetual. So I think it's been a great exposure of that risk-taking mindset, but also recalibration of what is risk. Yes. If you have control, what is actually at risk?
What is risk, and how do you address risk, and what can you control and what can't you control? And there's different approaches to managing each of those. If we can control the risk, then we can put in policies and procedures and know what is outcome. If we can't, then we need to act entrepreneurially and create what the next version is. And I think for many businesses, they've hit a watershed moment and they must fundamentally innovate business model. So, Meryl, if I can come back to you and the evolution of Bean Ninjas, 5 years old, 5 years young, it's been no doubt totally consuming for you in that 5 years' time. How has Bean Ninjas sort of altered in its approach to the way in which it's been exploring its business model over those 5 years?
I think we've adapted a lot. So we started with the mindset of we want to be a productized service. And I think we understood part of the problem we were solving for our customers, which was getting regular financial reports. But we didn't really understand our customers at the beginning. We just knew we think there's a problem in the market and we're going to solve it. And then as we started to understand our customers, we realised, well, the problem we're solving isn't bookkeeping. It's helping business owners to make great financial decisions. And to do that, they don't just need bookkeeping. They need better reports. And so we built out financial reporting in our business. And then they also need training around, well, what do these reports need? What do they mean? And then how do you use that to make good decisions? And so that's when we built a financial literacy course, and then we built a second program, which is more of a mentorship program. And so that's been part of our evolution, is really getting to understand our customers and then starting to build what they need. And so the courses and the mentorship program is one example of that. And where we're moving into the future is we've looked at, well, what customers do we provide the most value to, but what do we think is happening in the world? And we've noticed that e-commerce businesses are really experiencing growth. People are buying things online, and also digital agencies are there to support all of the businesses that are moving online. And so they're the two industry niches that we've decided to specialise in and really understand those businesses and the benchmarks, the metrics that drive those businesses, so that we're not just looking at sending you reports, but, well, what do these numbers mean? Are you doing well compared to your peers in the industry? And you can't do that if you're trying to specialise in 50 or 100 industries. So by niching down, we've gone in that direction. And when Aaron was talking about pre-selling the course, that's how we launched as well. So we sold a course, and it was a weekly presentation and group call. And so every week I was creating the content. I kind of had a framework, but it was based on the questions that were being asked. And yeah, that kind of time pressure made me deliver something, and it wasn't amazing, but it was good enough for people to have a good experience. And we've run that group mentorship program 5 times now, and have iterated and improved it each time based on what we've learned doing it. I would never have launched otherwise if I hadn't sold it and then really had to do something about creating that content.
I think there's a classic quote from the entrepreneurial world that goes ready, fire, aim, right? And we see it come out in this agile approach to building products and services, the fact that you're readying yourself, like you're responding to the hint of an opportunity, but you're pulling the trigger before you really know exactly what you're doing. And I think that requires a certain mindset. And I want to double down on this business model innovation that happened with Bean Ninjas. You're an accountant, a trained accounting professional, and you launched a product that was workplace training. That was online workplace training, the education space. Had you had any background in expertise in online workplace training?
I didn't really have any experience with online courses. So in a past life, my very first business was tennis coaching. So I already knew a bit about training and how you develop. It was a very different industry, but I knew about how you'd get someone from point A to point B and understand what they need to learn and in what order. And I'd also taught accounting at a university, but creating my own content was very different. How do you structure a course? So I tried to learn from other people and also not put pressure on myself. It doesn't have to be to the standard of a professional educator. It just has to make a difference to the people that are doing this course. Because if I tried to make it to the standard of someone that had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into creating a course, I would never have done it. So instead, I try to think about, am I helping people by doing this? And if they're getting value, then I've done my bit, and I'll keep on trying to improve.
Yeah, so I think this is a common thread. I think people perhaps think that the product that they deliver to market needs to be perfect. And that desire for perfection limits people's ability to be entrepreneurial, because it actually won't. When you're creating, you can't just create perfection straight away. There needs to be this morphing into whatever it is that becomes the ultimate. And Aaron, I know that Peak Persona has gone through a similar journey from its inception and the way it was first run to the way it is now. Yep. What enables you to think that way? Like you as a founder, as a co-founder, you've got a team that's what gives you the freedom to think that you can put something out to market that's not perfect?
Yeah, and look, it's a challenge because I'm embarrassed by a lot of versions of our early products. In fact, when I look back, I almost don't want to look at them. They're that embarrassing. and it does impact me on my own personal level when we put stuff out that might not be perfect. But I think for me, it's always been driven by value creation. So will this benefit someone? And yes, I know it's not the best version of my product or service, but what I will learn from that process will enable me to better help the next person. And so it's FLEARN. So this word within the entrepreneurship community, FLEARN, which is learn through failure. And, toddlers are great at this. They fall over, they get back up, they fall over, and they eventually learn to walk, and they touch the stove and they learn, don't touch the stove. Entrepreneurship is very similar. You have to, whatever we think is perfection, turns out is wrong. And the way to get it right is to go and make lots of little mistakes and learn and putting things out. And I think that's the beauty of this period right now is this normalization where it's now totally okay to jump on a Zoom call and your kids are screaming in the background, the dog's going off, you've got to get out of your seat to go answer the front door. Our level of expectation has dropped now. So now more than ever, you can launch something that's buggy, that isn't quite perfect, and it's totally acceptable. So we've never had a better time to actually experiment with something that isn't ideal and go and test it and see, and then make it perfect and scalable later.
Can I bring this down to a singular aspect of business, if I can? The concept of pricing. Like you're putting something new to market. You mentioned we're going to the US. How much does it cost to, what do people charge? I got no idea. And I'm talking from experience here because I've consumed a few of Peak Persona's products in the past, Aaron. And I think the variance in how much I've paid for very similar products has been between $60 and $300, thereabouts. Yeah. How do you work out your price? How does that work? If you're creating something new and you're putting to market and you can't go out and do a focus group and people say, oh, this is how we purchase other things because that doesn't exist. Yeah. They haven't consumed it before, so they don't know what the value is going to be. How do you price?
I think Meryl answered this before. You put it out there and see if people pay. For us, you're absolutely spot on. Our program, one of our programs is varied in price from $60 to $350. And what we actually found was we attracted a very different type of customer at the higher price point who was more engaged and actually found more value in the program. Whereas at the lower price point, they tend to be more disengaged and maybe it's a bit more of a flippant purchase. So by actually increasing our price, we find we get better outcomes for the people that we're helping. So for us, we've now found it through experimentation. Ultimately, that's what it came down to, was lots of experiments.
And you actually have to be willing for customers to be upset with you. Is that true?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And sometimes you don't need to give customers 100% what they want. And I've learnt that through a productized service. A lot of a productized service is about saying, no, we don't do that and we don't do this, but we do this thing really well and we're going to commit to that and you're going to get great value if that's a fit for you. And so that's been a lesson for me in not saying yes to everything. Whereas as a young accountant, we're trained to customer service, yes, everything the client wants. But to me, that's not how you run a great business. You pick something and you're great at that and you don't have to do everything else well or even take on those customers. And I wanted to tell a little story back on the pricing, which is, it's very hard to get right. And I think a lot of it's experimentation. And something we did in the early days of Bean Ninjas, we wanted to have a sales page on our website where we didn't even talk to anyone, sell it almost like software or a product. Someone clicks it and buys. We realised we're missing out on so much information by not talking to our customers. So we actually changed that and built in a sales call, or discovery call process. So then we could get a real sense of, well, why wouldn't you pay that? The ability to ask a lot more questions, and that information is so valuable when you're trying to learn about pricing and what your customers value. And I'd do that again, even for a lower priced product, just to learn.
I think what I'm seeing and I'm hearing in this conversation is there's so much of a customer-centric perspective in the way in which you talk. Everything is in the voice of the customer. And I think for a lot of business people, we prioritise our own perspective, the way things should be. And maybe that's based upon our own experience and therefore it's somewhat where the market might be. But what I'm hearing from the two of you is when you're making business decisions, you're referring to, yes, I've got the constraints of what I can do, like where my possibility of operations lie. But every other decision is entrenched in the customer's perspective. How do you talk to customers? How do you put yourself into the shoes of your customers? How does that actually happen?
I think for me, it's being human, like actually just having conversations, which sounds so bizarre to say, but in a digital world, there's this tendency, like Meryl was saying, just let's put up our website and see if anyone clicks. But when you actually take the time to call people and have a conversation and understand their entire persona beyond just their interaction with you, it's like you want to know your customers down to the point of what do they eat for breakfast? How many kids do they have? What are their concerns in life? What motivates them? What drives them? And when you understand someone on that level, then you can best serve them, because everything is coming down to being of service to that person. And I think we're shifting away now. People want to be more connected to the businesses they purchase from. They want to know the people behind it. They want to know your intent. They want to know your values. You can't just go online and sell something. Like you can, but I think to really build a tribe and a cult following, you have to build relationships with your customers, and that requires communication. And it's not one-way communication. Like to Meryl's point, it's about listening to them, understanding them, rather than you just saying and pitching. So I think it's an active practice. It's something you have to do consistently all the time.
Meryl, can you perhaps talk about how you've actually systematised the customer voice into your offering? Actually, how decisions that you have made to prioritise a customer's voice being an input to the way in which you operate your business. Do you have? I'm imagining you do. You've got systems to enable that to occur?
Yeah, so we have, and again, they're constantly evolving. So in the early days, it was quite challenging because we were a remote business selling to remote customers. How do we build these kind of human connections that Aaron was talking about? And it's harder to do that if you're talking on the phone. So then we changed to video calls to try and help with that communication. Then we tried to start going to events. So where do our customers hang out? We need to start going to events where we can build real relationships with our customers, get to know them. And it's similar, we're trying to build a tribe and a community. So that's another area of Bean Ninjas I didn't really talk about, but we have a Slack community where all of our customers and our partners are in there, and we run events and mastermind groups. So we're trying to bring people together, not just to communicate with us, but to get to know each other as well. And then we have systems like NPS, which is a way that you get feedback from customers. So we try and systemize things like that, check-in calls through account managers in our business, but we try and have a schedule and a systemized way of doing that. But then the touch points, I guess, that human-to-human contact, you can't necessarily systemize that conversation, but you can have systems in place to facilitate all of that, to make sure that you're actually doing it.
So I'm just going to double down on a couple of little terms you used there. NPS, Net Promoter Score. Mm-hmm. So there's ways of being able to measure the way in which your customers view you. Yeah. Fairly well-known field. You mentioned Slack. Perhaps some of our viewers haven't been exposed to Slack anymore, or yet.
Yes.
So I think it's in order to play in this game, you actually need to be educated as a founder, as a business owner. You need to be across what technological solutions are at play. So can you tell us what Slack is and how you utilise that within your business?
Slack's a messaging tool, so you can use it. I could use it to send you a direct message, or if I wanted to send a message to the group of us and we had a channel for fitness, then we could be talking in that channel about that topic, or we might have another channel related to business strategy and the relevant people would be in that group. So it's a really good way to facilitate conversations, and it's a little bit more informal than email, where you might have to sit down and write some paragraphs. It's more of a real-time conversation. And so we use that instead of email internally, but we still email our customers using a help desk system. Yeah,
and Slack certainly in other highly innovative locations has become the communication tool of choice. I think progressively in Australia that's the case as well. Aaron, can you perhaps talk of some other technology-based solutions that you use to be engaged and connected with your customer base?
Sure. So, Slack, absolutely. That is where our community is housed. And I think increasingly we're seeing a lot of products now shift from a one-off sell model into a subscription model. where they then build a community around it. And this is quite a common trend now for companies to be building value to their community, and the product almost just becomes an ancillary to that. For us, we use a lot of Zoom. We use a lot of video in ours, and that's two-way. So it's part of the nature of our programs. We have video reflections from participants, but all of our communication tends to be through Zoom, a lot of communication on Slack. We use a lot of social media, obviously, as well. We use a lot on YouTube, where we store our content, and also for some of our programs, we have online learning management systems that we use for our content as well. But the beauty, I think your point before is it's very easy to be head down in your business and focus on what you're currently doing. And certainly when we sold Orinda, I came out of that and sort of took a new fresh look at the landscape, and the world had changed. Like, we'd been doing Orinda for 9 years when we sold, and suddenly it was like, wow, look at all this stuff that exists. And I'd made the mistake of just being head down in the business for so long. So there was a period of having to retrain and learn all the new technology that's available. But the beauty is, so many things that were previously expensive outlays are now tools that are available for small subscription fees monthly that just enable you to operate worldwide. You can go global from your bedroom. Like, it's never been easier to do that.
It's true. It's never been easier. And I think there's been a real a breakthrough moment of how technology has become so readily available to the average business. And it, as you've just identified, Aaron, that requires the business owner to take their head up and to look around and see what solutions are out that perhaps might be able to contribute to the way in which the business operates and interacts with its customers. Yeah.
I feel like that's a common challenge as a business owner. How do you carve out that time? You're involved in day-to-day operations. You need to look after customers and marketing, but you also need to create space to think about the future and think about strategy and try and experiment with new things. Because if you don't do that, then eventually you're probably going to get left behind. But it often doesn't feel like a priority because you've got customers that want something right now. So how do you carve out that headspace and that time to learn new things and to think about things? Yeah. And I feel like that's something that as founders and as business owners, you need to prioritise and needs to be in your calendar. And so in a mastermind that I'm in, we try and have think days, and one of my colleagues has a think week every quarter, and that's to get away from day-to-day operations, and it's to think about strategy, it's to learn new tools. But it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You could have an hour a week just to read articles or listen to podcasts or experiment with new technology. So I think it can feel overwhelming, but even if you can carve out just a small amount of time outside of operations, which is challenging, but I think really important.
It's so true. I mean, we see the same even inside large corporates. So large workforce, but they still struggle to find the time or capacity. So it's one thing for the entrepreneur finding that time in a hectic schedule, but even the large corporates struggle. And so copying things like Google have maker days, they have their 10% time or their 20% time where you allocate a certain amount of time that every staff member has to spend on something new, something different that you're not currently doing, testing out that idea that someone just had. We've seen companies instill like little hackathon days, which are just internal, where you get someone from accounting solving a problem for someone in sales or vice versa because they're bringing a different perspective. But you, like you were saying, you need to architect these into your practice. Like, these need to be a thing that you do on schedule, because you'll never, there won't be this magic moment arrive where you've suddenly got the time free to do it. You need to prioritise it.
So there are some tips and techniques that the two of you use specifically into your schedule. Is there a particular wake-up time and activities you do in the morning? Is there a monthly meetup? You've mentioned mastermind groups and things. What do you have in your schedules where you prioritise looking out and beyond what your current operations are?
How much time do we have? Hundreds is the short answer. From getting up pre-dawn, like setting myself up at the start of every day, waking up 1 to 2 hours earlier than I have to respond to the world, to have time for me. And a lot of this is clear in my own head and set up my psychology, but it's also when I get to consume podcasts or audiobooks. So listening to content is a great way to get exposure to new ways of thinking, new perspectives, but also new tools. But also I have a no meeting Monday policy, which has probably now become a no meeting Wednesday policy. But yeah, scheduling time where you're not responding, you're actually being proactive in your choice and use of time, and therefore you get to prioritise what you work on. But also, actively experimenting. So how do you capture your ideas? And then, so we use Asana boards internally, which is just like a to-do list management system. But we capture our ideas there, we capture our decisions there, and then we process them through like a execution priority list. So making sure that we're always trying something new is really important. But yeah, there's a ton of I know you have a lot of techniques as well. So
yeah, similar to Aaron, I get up pre-dawn, and I probably learnt some of these things through Aaron's program. But exercise, carve out time for myself, thinking. I've got a queue of podcasts that I listen to, so I probably listen to 5 or 6 a week. I try and read a business book a month, but also just having thinking time, because if I'm rushing from work to family to exercise, then I think there's value. A lot of my thinking is done not in front of a laptop. So sometimes I might just be making or driving a little bit of a longer route just so I've got time to think through a problem. I'm also part of mastermind groups. So I'm in a couple of different ones. One's with entrepreneurs in different industries to me. And so we all think a bit differently, and I like that. We bring something different to the conversations, and we meet every 2 weeks. And now I find that challenging, and they'll ask me the hard questions. And we've been together for quite a long time. And I'm also in an industry group, which is monthly in the bookkeeping industry. And we could be considered competitors, but we don't really treat it like that. And it's more friendly conversation about how we can help each other in the industry and understand the challenges and talk through specific things. Like we might talk through what's your onboarding process like, and then we all try and brainstorm and help each other improve. So I find those things quite valuable. And I mean, lots of online communities as well, where again, I'm listening and learning from other people and trying to contribute what I can.
I know another one of yours though, surfing.
So
Some of your best thinking you've shared with me before comes when you're out surfing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it can be hard. It's the same sort of thing. You've got to carve out time for that as well.
Yeah.
It's tricky with a young family, but you're right. It's not at the desk. It's those where you're on your motorbike or you're surfing or riding, whatever it is. It's probably different for different people. But it's a chunk of time that's uninterrupted, without distractions.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've just talked about lots of mind-opening activities, like being aware and being forward-looking. But sometimes in business, you just need to be down and focused and doing. I've heard of this concept of a done day, which I know that both of you enact. What is a done day, and how does that assist you in actually like producing enormous amounts of focused work when it's needed?
Sure. So a done day is something we designed as a work sprint. You basically run through a series of Pomodoros, which are short or long, very focused, with zero distraction work sprints, where you then reward yourself with a break. And the science shows that if you use that model, you're far more productive. But we also use specific music during that time, so music without lyrics. There's a service called Focus at Will that is tailored music using neuroscience to actually optimize your productivity. We even encourage participants to avoid eating carbs and other food that will provide sugar spikes, like just to neutralize, like have a consistent energy level. And it's all facilitated with accountability. So the goal is that you get through the day, and it's a format anyone can apply. I know we've taught a lot of people how to use this internally within their startups or within corporates, but it's a great model just for getting it done. So when you do need to knuckle down at some point and actually execute and get things done.
Yeah. And I've been involved in some of the done days that Aaron has run and found them really productive. And so I've tried to bring back some of that philosophy to my team as well. And we can't necessarily, because we're in different time zones, we can't necessarily run a whole day like that. But some of the philosophy around having short, focused bursts of attention, we've done in smaller groups in our business as well. And it's been really useful to embed those skills in other people in our team. And I think that's important. What you're learning as a founder or someone else in the business, how can you bring that back to everyone else in your team and help everyone else develop as well?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is there's this discipline that sits behind your behaviours. And I think often when we think of entrepreneurs, we think of them as like lucky risk takers, right? But they're not. They are disciplined individuals who are approaching business in a different way. They're looking at opportunity. And when adversity comes to the fore, the entrepreneurial mind is one that is looking for the advantage that can be taken from that. And if that involves innovating business models, that involves innovating business models. And if I need to create a new online workplace training, that's what I'll do, right? And I'll approach that in a particular way that has a certain discipline behind it. It's informed by future looking, it's by looking outside of industry as well as within industry, by having knowledge of technology and how technology can aid in the operation of the business, and also in discipline around work practice. It's been really informative to see. Yeah, wonderful.
I guess just one final wrap up. I could listen to you, both of you, all day. It's very, very educational. But for our viewers who may be watching this video that are thinking about, well, how do I jump into the entrepreneurship way of life? How do I be a bit more innovative? Do you have 3 tips each that you could maybe give the beginner who may be leaving one business to another or restarting their own business? Like, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so for me, it would be starting by self-education. So listening and learning from other people, and whether that's books, podcasts, going along to events or virtual events if it's not a physical thing, and just absorbing everything that you can. The next tip from me is about just getting started. So it can be a side hustle. There's nothing stopping you these days from just trying something. You can have a full-time job and you can still do a little something on the side and just try it and learn. There's so many skills to learn as an entrepreneur. And I think just getting started is really important. And then my third is about not comparing yourself to someone else. So just get started, run your own race, do things at your own pace, and don't look at Joe next door who's building a 7-figure startup and did it in 6 months. That's not relevant to what you're doing. Think about what your goals are and build a business around what you're trying to achieve.
Great. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, very similar. I would say just do it. Entrepreneurship has to be learnt by doing it. It's an experience. It's a skill set in application. Second is connecting to the tribes of support, because there is an unlimited amount of support available to you. And even if it's just a peer group of other entrepreneurs on the same journey, to talk to through those moments when you do hit the hardships, or to share knowledge or connections. And then I think the third one would just be understand your why. Why do you want to get into this? What's your motivator? Because often we all think we need to go and build a huge business, or in our vernacular, a unicorn company. But reality, a small little micro business might actually be perfect for what you want to achieve. So being really clear on your why is really important as well.
Great, some great tips there. So thank you both for your time, and thank you for tuning in to Business Now. We'll see you next time.